Okay, Dr. Trent.
Good evening, and thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Dr. Trent, and I am the chair of the Health Committee for the Northern Virginia chapter of National Coalition of 100 Black Women, along with my co-chair, Carla Conley. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Tanja Thompson. Dr. Thompson is the author of What to Expect When You Weren't Expecting Breast Cancer. She's a contributor to I've Been Diagnosed, Now What? Courageously Fighting Cancer in the Face of Fear. Tanja has survived breast cancer twice. She is a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force who was retired with a service-connected disability of 100%. Utilizing strengths from 25 years of active service, combined with her surviving her breast cancer battle twice, Dr. Thompson is the founder of the Breast Cancer Move Foundation, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. She is also the CEO of the Transformational Resolution Group, specializing in coaching individuals to work within themselves to transcend the traumatic events that have stifled their lives. You will often hear her say, conflict is her business. She's a TEDx speaker, coach, and organizer. At her first TEDx talk, From Tragedy to Triumph, she shared her heartfelt, uncovering her mental health challenges, and she endured her breast cancer twice. Dr. Thompson is a member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, where she has served in the role of legal redress chair, helping with civil rights issues. She is on the Loudoun Health Commission Board, the Cancer Action Coalition of Virginia Board, a National Action Advisory Veteran Board, and a previous Loudoun Social Service Board member of the Loudoun Water, a $1.8 billion company. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Tanja Thompson.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Trent. I so appreciate that wonderful introduction. I often, when I hear my bio, I'm always thinking, who are they talking about? Is it me? I want to take you all on a journey of what it felt like to be diagnosed with breast cancer, not once, but twice. To be able to live through and walk through this journey that so many of us have walked through, but we don't talk about it. Let me tell you this in statistics, because numbers make a difference. 365, 1,000, 8, and 40. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. So think about your organization, National Council of 100 Black Women. If you count 1 of 8 of those individuals, one of those individuals could potentially be diagnosed with breast cancer. As a breast cancer survivor, I think about breast cancer every single day, 365 days out of the year. 1 in 1,000 men are also diagnosed with breast cancer. Often we don't think about men being diagnosed with breast cancer. To even add to that, Black women are 40% chance of dying from breast cancer. But if you look at the statistics, we are diagnosed at a lesser rate, but the mortality of us dying are so many different factors. So think about my journey. Think about someone that you know. And I know we're on several different platforms. How many of you know of someone that was diagnosed with breast cancer? Either put a yes in the chat or either yourself. I'm seeing a lot of yes. Someone said their mother. Someone said themselves. Because if we think about it, we probably know someone that is being diagnosed. Let me ask you this. If there's anyone that's on this platform, on any of the platforms, what did you think about when you were first diagnosed? What is the first thing that came to mind? If you can put something in the chat. And I'll tell you what I thought when I received the diagnosis. Will I be here for my daughter? Mhm. Let me tell you when I initially got the diagnosis, the first thing I thought about that this was a death sentence, that I was going to die. So in 2005, I was active duty in the military. I was at the height of my career. I was a senior master sergeant and actually was on vacation when I this. The first thing I thought was I wasn't going to be here for my family. I wasn't going to be here for retirement. I wasn't going to be here to see my family at all. And I'm a religious person. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in a Pentecostal church. So I tell people, they say, well, what is it to do in Indiana in a Pentecostal church? Go to church. And we were taught to pray. But when I received that diagnosis, it was like someone had stabbed me in my heart. I was active. I was a runner. I had just ran a marathon just a few years prior to. I ate well. And I was like, what is happening? What did I do? Am I being punished for this? Did I do something wrong? And let me tell you what, and I can remember when I went to work, and as I mentioned earlier, I was active duty. And I went to work and I put everyone, most of those that were my friends, because you don't want everyone to know, right? And I said, listen, I'm letting you all know that I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I said, it's not a death sentence. I know that's the first thing that's coming to your mind. I said, but if you tell anybody, I'm going to cut you. And I said, if I happen to die on the table, I'm going to come and haunt you in your sleep. And they were like, Tanja, how do you tell us that you have cancer and then you're going to kill us at the same time? I said, listen, because I don't want anyone to know my business. I didn't want anyone to know about my diagnosis. How many of you know someone that has been diagnosed with breast cancer and didn't tell anybody? If you can put it in the chat. I did. I was that person. I was ashamed. I was ashamed that it would reflect on me that I had did something wrong, that I was being punished. So often that is the case with so many women with breast cancer, as well as men too. To why I know someone diagnosed with cancer. And they probably didn't tell anyone, or they vowed that if you told someone, it was to keep it a secret. Because that's what happens. That's what we do in our community so often. So let me take you on this journey of diagnosis, education, research, and how outreach makes such a big difference in our community. So as I mentioned earlier, I was active duty in the military. I was a senior master sergeant. And I remember sitting there in the doctor's office. Now, when I was diagnosed, most women you usually feel a lump. So I was very vigilant in going, and one, I had my baseline mammogram when I was 39 years old. So like I mentioned earlier, I was in the military. So it wasn't unusual for us to go in on a regular basis to get our, to get tested and to go for our medical appointments. But for some reason, I was having this pain in my left breast. And I was feeling tired. I never had a lump. I never had a discharge of my breast. It was nothing like that. So I remember going to my doctor, and fortunately, she looked like me. And I'll tell you another story about when the person didn't look like me. And she said, "Miss Thompson, you just had your baseline 14 months ago for breast cancer. So more than likely is not anything." But she said, "You know what?" And I remember these words. She said, "Why don't we go ahead and get another mammogram just to be sure?" She said, "You're only 40 some years old. More than likely is not anything." And she said, typically pain is not associated with breast cancer. So I trusted her in that fact. So I remember going to the mammogram clinic, and I remember them squashing and taking the mammogram. And I remember, because typically what they have you go sit in the waiting room. So I went to go sit in the waiting room. And they like, we can still getting this film, this stuff on your film. So can you come back and let's do it again? So I did it again. And they said it's still being repeated. And they said, "Well, did you put on any deodorant or anything like that?" And I said, "Yeah, I just came from the doctor's office." She said, "Why don't you come back in a couple of days, but this time don't put any lotion and don't put on any lotion or any deodorant." So that's what I did. Went in, I went on about my business. Family went on vacation. I was doing travel with my job, and they called me up and said, "Ms. Thompson, we need for you to come in for your diagnosis." Now, mind you, I didn't know anyone with breast cancer. I didn't even know honestly, I didn't even know what breast cancer was. So when I went in for my appointment, the furthest thing from my mind was that I had breast cancer. So I'm sitting there in the office, and I'm like, okay, she's fiddling with these papers. And she says, "Miss Thompson, you have breast cancer." I looked around. I said, she couldn't be talking to me. It must be someone else. She must have someone else's diagnosis. She must have someone else's results. And I said, "Doc, it couldn't be me." She said, "Miss Thompson, we actually went back and looked at your previous mammogram to just be sure." She said, "Because in this short period of time of 14 months, the breast cancer has ravaged throughout both of your breasts." She said, "We can't even do a lumpectomy because it has ravaged throughout both of your breasts." One of the things, so let's put a pin right there. And this is a teaching moment. Never go to an appointment by yourself. I didn't take my husband. I was there all alone and receiving this diagnosis. So how did you think I felt when I received that diagnosis? Put something in the chat, because I wanted you all to get engaged. I want you to be on this journey of the importance of education, of understanding that you have control over your destiny, to why I named it From Tragedy to Triumph, because even though it was a tragedy, I learned something from it, to why it's now a triumph. I went by myself. So I'm only hearing approximately 10% of what the doctor is saying. So if you know of someone, even yourself, be sure to take someone with you, or you record it. I felt helpless, absolutely. I felt like, how am I going to now tell my family? So when I looked at the x-rays, it was like, anyone that's done shooting, it looked like a buckshot where it just splattered throughout both of my breasts. So she said, and this is where it's important to ensure that when you go to your appointment, make sure you take someone with you, but understand that you have a voice in this process. Don't feel muted. Don't feel that the doctors know everything. If you have something that is on your mind, be sure to speak up so that they understand and that they know. So I'm looking at the x-ray, and this is what she says. She says, Ms. Thompson, the right breast is more infected, and we will probably have to do a mastectomy on just your right breast. The left breast doesn't look bad. That's probably out of a 30 or 40-minute conversation. That's all I can remember. I remember leaving, going to my car, and I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there in the car like this. I have a 5-year-old at home. I have a 10-year-old at home, and I have a 15-year-old at home. Am I going to be there to see them grow up? Am I going to be there to see my daughter graduate from high school? So I remember sitting there in the car, pick up the phone, and it rings, and I hang up. I pick up the phone, it rings, and it hangs up. I pick up the phone again to call my husband. I said, baby, I have breast cancer. That is all I could say. And I can remember the drive home. The drive home was probably the longest drive of my life. And I remember going home and him saying, I know I should have gone. I know I should have gone. My husband is the best of the best. He grabbed me and he said, baby, we're going to get through this. You're not going to die. He said, you have too much to do. We have young kids at home. You're not going to die. So we actually went back to the doctor's office for her to tell us more about what my diagnosis was. So what I had was DCIS, which is ductal carcinoma in situ. And as it was in both breasts, but this breast from their x-ray showed that this one was more infected. So I actually end up going to get a biopsy. Now, this is another point of where someone saved my life. At that biopsy appointment, the doctor looked at the x-ray and he said, well, we only have an order for one x-ray, and that is for the right breast. And the technician was sitting there and she's like, well, he said, well, let's do both, since both breasts have equally DCIS in it. Let's see just how far this goes. And the technician says, well, we only have an order for one. He said, I don't care if we have an order for one, but we need to do both breasts. He said, I'll put in the order. So he did a biopsy of both breasts. And what do you think the results were? Put something in the chat. What ended up happening was the left breast was invasive, meaning it was coming outside of the ductal walls. So mind you, if they had only done one breast, this one here, this one was still the one that was more problematic. So we all have angels and people in our lives that come through to help us, that doctor that did that biopsy was also my other savior, because he made the decision not to only do one, but to do both breasts. So mind you, now, like I mentioned, active duty, I was like, Doc, you talking about, I'm 40 some years old. I'm still trying to get my groove on. How are you going to tell me you're going to take both of my breasts? So that's when the vanity hit in. The vanity set in at that point, right? So they said, well, Miss Thompson, we're going to immediately do what is called reconstruction. So they did reconstruction. So can I say, I don't know who's on the line or not, but can I say this? I went from B's to C's. So I'm kind of happy with my rack. So if we're talking about turning lemons into lemonade, so I got a bump up, if we can say. So hopefully someone has found the humor in that. But what that tells us is that we have the strength, we have the ingenuity to be able to find the good, and even when it is a tragedy, even though we think or feel that is a death sentence, it doesn't have to define you. As I didn't talk about breast cancer the first time. Now, the first time when I had it, all they did was take all of the tissue to include the nipples. They did the node extraction where it had not spread it anywhere as they thought. So they took everything. They took all of the tissue. So you would think, in my mind, I thought that, yeah, the bump up. I thought that I was clear. If you take all of the tissue, what is left? What's left? 5 years, almost to the date and to the month, I found the lump. Now, mind you, I said this one, the left breast was the worst, was the invasive breast. I go to feel, so this is another, so let me tell you, so let's put a pin there. Education is important. It is important that you, one, on an annual basis, get a breast exam, to get your mammogram. If you or someone in your family has been diagnosed, go with them to that appointment. If you know of a woman who hasn't or is fearful of going to get a mammogram, go on a buddy program. But ensure that you get your mammogram, especially if you're over 40 years old, to get your mammogram every year. The other piece is, while you are in the shower, and what's important is consistency, so that you know what your breast feels like. So I no longer have breast tissue. This side here is silicone. This one here, I end up having a trans flap where they took muscle from my abdomen, tunneled it up to make this breast here. So for me, doing a breast exam on a monthly basis doesn't work for me because I don't have any breast tissue, but I do still feel my breast. So when you are in the shower, just gently place your hand on the back of your head. And while the water and the soap is going over, just briefly go in a circular motion around and under your breasts, and just do this circular motion so that you can feel what your breast feels like. And especially for women that have dense breasts, it's even more important. And even though you may be a small breast-sized woman, it's still important that every month at the same time, it doesn't matter what time of if it's before your menstrual or afterwards, but as long as you go. And most of the time during those times of the month, your nodes and different things are going to sometimes swell up where you feel like it's something. If that's your norm, do it afterwards so that you don't get the fear that that swelling under your arm is actually from your menstrual period. You do the same thing with the other side. You just go around in a circular motion, because 40% of diagnoses come from women doing self breast exams every month. So it's important that you do that for your own health, and those women that have young girls, get them started early as well, that they are familiar with their breasts. More and more young women are being diagnosed under 30 with breast cancer. Also, does the silicone ever have to be, I think it says removed. I can't see your full comment. No, it doesn't have to be removed. So this one on here on my right side has been there since 2005. I do go to my healthcare provider on a regular basis to ensure that there's no leakage, to ensure that it's not, it's been compromised in any type of way. And actually, I have an ultrasound that's scheduled here in the next couple of months, well, next month actually, to do a full exam, because I was feeling some pulling. So think about this as well. Whenever you have any type of work that's done on your body, nothing goes back the same way. So my pectoral muscles, as they usually are under your breasts or behind, mine now fall on top of. So there's certain things that I can no longer do because of the muscle that is now over the breast. So I have to be even more diligent, because if something was to form, there's a possibility that I wouldn't be able to catch it. So I'm hyper vigilant. One of the things the doctor mentioned, and I thought this was very crass, and she says, how did she frame it? She said, you're basically in surveillance, meaning that most women go in once a year for their mammogram. That doesn't do they can't do those for me, so I can't have a mammogram. So I have to be very vigilant in ensuring that when I feel my breasts, that I know what they feel like, because there's two different breasts. This one has tissue from the muscle in my stomach. This one here is silicone. So I have to be hyper vigilant in how I approach the doctors, but then also letting them know that I know my body, that if I'm feeling something, if there's something that needs to be done, that I need to be that one. I have to be that advocate for myself. So let me now take the pen out of my second diagnosis. So my second diagnosis was here again on the left breast. And I'm feeling something, it's like, wow, this doesn't feel right. Now, mind you, the tissue, because it's been stretched, is thin, not thin to the site, but you can feel things. If there's something there, it's very easy to feel. So I'm feeling something there. And I said, and this is what kept ringing in my mind. What kept ringing in my mind was, it's not supposed to be there. It's not supposed to be there. So I go to the breast center. So at this time, I am now since retired. So I go Walter Reed, if anyone is in the Washington, D.C. area, Walter Reed Military Army Hospital, there in Silver Spring. So I went to the breast clinic there. So I see this doctor, but she doesn't look like me. She doesn't look like me. So I'm sitting there in her office and I said, hey, doc, I feel something here on my breast. And I said, it feels like a lump. Again, knowing your body, knowing what it feels like. And this is what she tells me. She's like, oh no, Miss Thompson, that's not anything. That's just probably the silicone where it has now creased up. But no, I don't feel anything. And I said, well, doc, I said, I think it is something. And I said, because I said, well, don't you feel it? And she's like, no, I don't feel anything. I don't think it's anything. But what kept ringing in the back of my head was, it's not supposed to be there. God puts you in place. God gives you the discernment of when things are not good and when things are bad. And it's important to us that we listen to that little voice that's telling us that we should or should not be doing something, or that something is not right. So I said, okay, fine. But my plastic surgeon who had did my reconstruction was just down the hall in another office. Because I had a good relationship with him, and he was a white male, I went to the office and I said, hey, is Dr. Bonacari here? And they's like, oh yeah. So he came out, he said, hey, Miss Thompson, what's going on? I said, well, I just left the breast center and I feel a lump on my left breast. And he's like, huh, okay. So we went into his office and he felt this side and he feels like, he said, I do feel something. He said, this is what he said too. He said, if I had not done your first reconstruction or your first surgery, he said, I could possibly miss it as well. He immediately ordered a ultrasound, a MRI, and I think they did an X-ray. All of those things came out inconclusive, except for the MRI. The MRI came back that it is something, but they can't figure out what it was. Me? And this is what he said. He said, Ms. Thompson, I know that's not going to be good enough for you, is it? I was like, absolutely not. That's not good enough for me. So he said, so Ms. Thompson, he said, this is what I'm going to need for you to do. I'm going to need for you to go back to the breast center, show them the results, and let them know what should some possible next steps. So I went back to the breast center and she said, well, you know, what we could do is, since it's inconclusive, it's probably nothing. It's probably, you know how they get, oh, it's probably nothing. And I said, it's probably nothing, but that doesn't tell me that is conclusive, right? I want to be sure. I need for you to, I didn't say this, I said, but in my mind, I'm like, I need for you to do your job. I need to know, I need to have that comfort level, knowing that even though you don't think it's anything, I need for it to be conclusive. What she ordered was a surface biopsy, where they don't take all of the tissue, they just do a simple procedure where they just take a snippet of it. And that's what they did. So they went and took a snippet of it. Within a month, well, less than a month or so, it came back that it was just tissue. But remember what I said, and this is what I told them, I said, I don't care what it is, it's not supposed to be there. And I'm not even going to tell you what else was going on with my son, who was having kidney issues and liver issues at the same time. So my husband at that particular time. So, you know, you think about being mom and you're going through your stuff, just think about everything else that is going on at the same time in your life. Life does not stop because mom has a diagnosis. Life doesn't stop when you have a child who was born at 1 pound and 5 ounces at 23 weeks of gestation. Life doesn't stop when the doctor says, oh my goodness, his liver isn't doing well and he may end up needing a transplant. So life doesn't stop. So as I'm telling you my journey, everything else is also going on as well. So by this time, I have a 10-year-old, I have a 15-year-old, and I have a 20-year-old. At that time that I needed that biopsy, my daughter was taking me to my appointment, and my husband was taking care of our son who was just coming out of the hospital. So when I tell this story from tragedy to triumph, it's not just my story, it's my husband's story, it's my daughter's story, it's my son's story, it's my youngest son's story, it's everybody that is a part of my tribe that is also going through this as well. So when we are put into a position to be able to help others, while we are also helping ourselves. So God often entrusts us with this gift, and with this gift to be able to share that we are that vessel, we are that conduit to help others through this journey, to not be afraid, to not live in fear. So let me take the pen out, because I'm sure you're like, okay, what happened, right? So it came back that it was scar tissue. Again, back of my head, it's not supposed to be there. I don't care what it is. It's not supposed to be there. The doctor, you know how when you think you have a win, I could even sense the smirk on her face when it came back that it was just scar tissue. And I said, I don't care what it is. It's not supposed to be there. So within 2 weeks, we scheduled to have a full biopsy, to have the lump removed. It wasn't even, a biopsy. It was to have it fully removed. And as a result of that, they tested it. So what do you think were the results? Was it positive or negative for breast cancer? If you can put something in the chat. Someone says negative. Someone says positive. So in 2010, I was diagnosed again with breast cancer. And this time, not only did I have DCIS, but so DCIS, HER2 positive, and it was also estrogen positive as well. And this is what happened, because you wonder, okay, the first test came back that it was scar tissue. The second test came back that it was cancerous. And this is what happened. And God does, even though, you have to have faith, right? My faith is that of a mustard seed. My faith is unconditional and unwavering in God, because I know He has done things in my life that only He and only His hands on there could have even made it possible. The cancer, the scar tissue was protecting me and not allowing it to spread and become massive. So the scar tissue was shielding it from growing any larger. So tell me if that's not a testimony. Absolutely, absolutely. So because of the second diagnosis, which was approximately 5 years from the first one, I ended up having to go through chemo. I went through 6 rounds of chemo every 3 weeks. My first chemo treatment was 1 October. The last one was February. So by Halloween, by 30 October, I was fully bald. So I believe by this time, I'm fully into my diagnosis. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to have this diagnosis once, but twice, and God has saved me again for it, then I'm gonna relish in it. And then exactly what I did. So for Halloween, I went as the airbender, completely bald. I had my husband shave my head. He actually printed with makeup an arrow down from here all the way down to the back of my head. My whole family came over and we celebrated with me walking around with this bald head with this arrow. Because I realized that I can no longer live in shame. I can no longer hide. Because the first time I didn't go through chemo or radiation. The second time I can't hide. I'm bald. My eyebrows are gone, all the hair is gone. My nails, they've started to turn black. So I'm like, if I'm going to live in this, I might as well use it to help other individuals. To why I started my nonprofit, the Breast Cancer Move Foundation, to why I feel the cultural competencies of our healthcare providers are inadequate because they don't look, a lot of them don't look like us. And even for us as women, we feel muted and we don't speak up. We don't tell our healthcare providers, we don't talk about how breast cancer how we can make and change the dynamics of how we look at breast cancer. Research. One of the things about research is that a number of Black women are diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer and metastatic breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer. A lot of what comes out of changing lives, as well as sparing lives, as well as continuing that journey, is research. There are a number of researchers out there that are looking for people like us, that are looking for Black women to participate. I have a real good friend now, Sharon. She has metastatic breast cancer, where it has metastasized throughout her entire body at some form or another. Her hair, because she's always in chemo or always in a chemo treatment, her hair is completely bald. But because she has participated in these trials, because she is out there advocating for more women that look like us to be able to have these life-saving medications, these life-saving treatments, is because we need to have more people that look like us to participate in these trials. We can't ask for the medical community to do more if we're not willing to do more ourselves. We can't do better in eradicating breast cancer if we don't also decide that we want to talk about it. I had a real good friend at my job, and we're having these, and this is the male, we're having these conversations, and he's talking about his sister, how he doesn't understand her behavior, how she's in the federal government and she has a good job, but she always seems to be spending her money. And she had lost her house and she was living in the basement, and he just couldn't figure, he was so distraught. He just couldn't understand what was going on with him. So he was sharing these things with me. I saw him 6 months later, and this is what he told me. He said, "Tanja, remember the conversation I was having with you about my sister, how we couldn't figure out what was going on, why she was spending her money, while she was giving away things?" He said, one of our friends, she was living in one of their friends' basement. I think the individual was a realtor because she had sold her house. He said 2 weeks, maybe three weeks from Christmas, he said we received a call from her friend, and the friend was hesitant in telling the family because the sister had asked her advocacy, do not tell my family that I'm in the hospital. Don't tell them, I don't want them to know that I'm in the hospital. So the family goes to the hospital and they can't believe um, how she looks and what's going on. They find out then that she has metastatic breast cancer and it has radiated throughout her body. And she refused to have treatment when she was diagnosed almost 2 years ago. She did not tell her family. The brother was devastated. And oftentimes we think that the individual is being selfish by not telling family members. Anyone that knows has been through a traumatic emotional event in their life, they know that one of the things that diseases take from you is your power. It takes control where you do not feel that your life, one, sometimes is not worth living if you have to go through chemo, if you have to go through radiation, because believe me, it is not a cakewalk. It is not a cakewalk. But she made the decision that she did not want to have any life-saving treatment. He was devastated. So as he's talking about how selfish she was and really in his feelings, and I just sat him down and I held his hand and I said, Anthony, your sister probably more than anything felt that this is the only way that she had control of her life. That having a diagnosis of metastatic breast cancer takes control of everything, takes control of you as an individual. So she did it thinking that she was actually preserving her in your eyes, that she didn't want you to look at her as a person with breast cancer. Because most of the time, when people look at individuals, and it could be with any type of disease or any type of diagnosis, that's that person with breast cancer. You know, she had breast cancer. Oh, I wonder is she going to live? So there's also a stigma that comes with a diagnosis of breast cancer. So I'd ask that if you haven't gotten your mammogram this year, get it. If you know of a woman that your sister, your aunt, take them and ensure that they get their breast exam. Make sure they get their mammogram, because truly, honestly, it's a step in saving your life. Continue to do your self exams, because it is foundation of early diagnosis and early treatment. Do not feel muted. Have those conversations with your healthcare providers. Have those often very difficult conversations, and not feeling fearful that just because you speak up and speak out, they're going to think less of you. Actually, they're going to think more of you. The more control that you have over your life, the more control that you have over your diagnosis, makes the journey not so painful. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that my life is grand. I have a beautiful life because I didn't let breast cancer control me. And as mentioned in the intro, one, I did a TED talk. My husband, if you ever get a chance, look at it's on YouTube. Tanja Thompson, From Tragedy to Triumph. Is only 17 or 18 minutes, but it'll also give you an insight of that journey, being a mom, being a military veteran, and going through this diagnosis of breast cancer. I also wrote a book, What to Expect When You Wasn't Expecting Breast Cancer. This is my journal of my diagnosis with breast cancer. And if you go to my website, www.tanjathompson.com, you can order the book there as well. And I'm looking at the time. I'm military, so I'm very conscious of time. So I want to open up to see if anyone has any questions, if there's anything that's in the chat that someone wants to ask me. This is the opportunity to do so. Is anyone out there?
I have a question.
Mhm.
I know that you said that you were very healthy before, a healthy eater and a runner. Did you have to modify that, or did you choose to modify that even more after your diagnosis? Like maybe, like, I don't know, vegetarianism or anything like that?
You know what? I did not. And this is the part I didn't tell. I believe no one in my family has ever had breast cancer. I believe my breast cancer came on as it was an environmental, one, being in the military and being in places that could potentially have triggered my breast cancer. And the ironic thing about my first diagnosis in 2005, I was actually working in the Pentagon area, and two other women that I know of personally, also, we all were diagnosed at pretty much the same time. When I was off work for approximately 3 to 4 months, when I came back is when I found out about two other women being diagnosed with breast cancer. The only thing that we all had in common, because they also didn't have a family history of it, is that we all worked in the same building and we were all pretty much on the same floor. Maybe I was on the 9th floor, they was on the 10th floor, or vice versa. So I didn't change my diet. I've always been a healthy eater. So I didn't go vegetarian. I do drink a lot of water, and I do a lot of fruits and vegetables. Even now I run. Every morning I'm running anywhere from 2 to 3 miles. So I stay healthy. That also helps my mental mindset. I didn't talk about how this type of diagnosis really plays on your mind. So having a positive mindset, finding out your safe space, that space that you can go to whenever you are feeling that I was depressed, I had anxiety, I still have anxiety, I still have bouts of depression, but I found the way to manage it, and that is through exercise and definitely prayer and believing in God.
Thank you.
Anyone have anything else? Because I could go on talking, but again, I know this was only for an hour. I hope that I held your attention. I hope that you learned something from my journey. I hope that you learned that even though this was a tragedy, not once, but twice, I found a way to uplift others and help others go through this journey, and not seeing it as a death sentence, not feeling or seeing that you have to, you don't, you can talk about it, because the more that you talk about it, the more that you learn. And I definitely believe in learning. And that is the only way that we are going to be able to find humanity in ourselves as well as for others.
Well, if there's no further questions, we thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. Thank you for sharing this wonderful information. It's definitely inspired us, and we definitely will be sharing your information with others in regards to breast cancer. So thank you very much, and we hope you guys have a great evening.
All right. Thank you.